Welcome to Muslims and Mental Health with Sister Heather, a groundbreaking program looking at mental health issues through the biopsychosocial spiritual paradigm.
Welcome to another episode of Muslims and Mental Health. Today we are going to discuss domestic violence toward men. As you know, October is the month of awareness for domestic violence, and domestic violence against men often goes unaccounted for or overlooked. And so today I want to set aside some time to particularly look at domestic violence toward men. Often when we hear about domestic violence toward men, people roll their eyes or they say that's not possible. How can that be? But as I have mentioned in a previous episode, we do know from Quran the story of Yusuf, the prophet Yusuf, or Joseph, as some people refer to him, that he himself had a woman that was trying to seduce him and ripped his shirt off of him. So it is possible that females can be aggressive, that they can be violent. And what we know from research is that actually is estimated that 39% of spousal assault victims are men. The U.S. Department of Justice is the one that came up with this study, and it was done over a 20-year longitudinal study. And if you take into account all the acts of physical aggression, there are about equal numbers of men and women being abused. Let me repeat that because I don't think that we're fully aware of that or that we take that into account most of the time when we're thinking about domestic violence. If you take into account all the acts of physical aggression, then there's about equal numbers of men and women being abused. This is really important to remember because that means that we're not hearing about all the abuse that happens to men. And there's a reason for that. Men are more likely to be seen as weak if they come out with that they've been abused by their wives. They don't receive the same types of physical injuries necessarily by the domestic attacks. Simply for their size or their masculinity, sometimes the women cannot affect them as crucially as a man can toward a woman. That doesn't mean that it's less painful or less hurtful or that they are less victims than women are. It's really important that we quash this, complete myth that men are not abused. The first research to show that violence in the home claimed victims of both sexes was conducted over 25 years ago by two respected researchers, Gellis and Strauss. They published results of their survey stating that women assault their partners at about the same rate as men assault their partners. This applied to both minor and severe assaults. The findings were published in 1977 in a book called Violence in the Family, which is kind of interesting to hear because we've not been talking about this issue in any real way in the last 30, 40 years, even though we have had research that shows this equal violence for that period of time. Most of the time it's kept quiet, we don't hear about it, and in the rare instances that we do hear about it, it's mostly claimed that, well, the woman was acting in self-defense. What's interesting, though, is that when you actually talk to someone who has been a survivor of female violence toward them, or what we call it intimate partner violence, that's not at all what is the feeling. The men actually are hurt. They do feel victimized. They often don't know what to do about it. So let's look at some of the things that they can do, look at some of the resources that are available, questions to ask themselves, and what you might be experiencing if you are in fact a male who is a victim of domestic violence. So, what you might be experiencing if your partner is a domestic violent person is that they call you names, they insult you, or they put you down. They prevent you from going to work or school. They stop you from seeing your families and friends. They try to control how you spend your money or what you're going to wear outside. They act jealous, possessive, or constantly accuse you of being unfaithful. They get angry when you are eating certain things or drinking certain things. They threaten you with violence or a weapon. They hit, they kick, they shove, they slap, they choke, or otherwise hurt you, your children, or your pets. They force you to have sex or engage in sexual acts against your will, and yes, this can happen to men as well as women. They blame you for their violent behavior and tell you that you deserve it. And one thing that you should also note as a man, if you are experiencing domestic violence, that the results of the domestic violence don't just affect you. They have effects beyond you, and they can affect your children as well. They will, and this will actually show in children because it puts them at risk for developing psychiatric disorders or having problems at school or being aggressive themselves. And lots of times they have low self-esteem. So if you see this in your children, you need to really think about and evaluate whether your situation is actually good for you and that you might need to get help or you might need to get out of it altogether. Look at this pattern if you are in an abusive relationship. Does your abuser threaten or violence toward you? Do they strike you? Do they apologize and promise to change or offer you gifts? Does the cycle repeat itself? Because we know that with domestic violence, it is a cycle. And it will become more frequent and more severe over time. And ultimately, sometimes it actually does lead to death. There is a national domestic violence hotline that you can avail yourself of. Then the hotline number is 1-800-799-SAFE. In other words, 1-800-799-7233. This hotline will provide crisis intervention and referrals to resources. Another opportunity for you to seek help would be to contact someone you trust. Make sure you guard your privacy. So be careful if you're in a domestic violence situation currently. You want to be careful how you use your phone because those can be hacked into and interrupted. Your home computer as well. Look for GPS devices in your vehicle. Frequently change your email passwords. You have your doctors as a resource as well. They can help treat you, and of course therapists are available to help you as well. And then ultimately your local court can help you. Some other online resources that you might be able to find are the Battered Husband Support, batteredmen.com, Domestic Violence Against Men, Domestic Violence Against Men in Colorado, Domestic Violence from Another Perspective, maledepression.com, and SAFE, Stop Abuse for Everyone. This is another website. And again, there's another domestic violence hotline, which is 1-888-743-5754. And then lastly, I want to cover some questions that you might quiz yourself with to find out if you are a person suffering with domestic violence. So question number 1 would be to ask yourself, does your partner sometimes embarrass you or criticize you in front of others? Do you avoid disagreeing with your partner's opinions or voicing your own opinions? Does your partner ever accuse you of lying about where you've been or who you've been with? Has your partner's behavior stopped you from inviting friends or family to your home? Does your partner ever accuse you of having affairs or otherwise act jealousy without cause? Has your partner ever destroyed any of your belongings or household items? Does your partner regularly threaten to harm you physically or making threatening gestures toward you? Has your partner ever threatened to take your children away from you if you try to leave? Do you sometimes change your plans or cancel outings to avoid your partner's reaction? Does your partner blame your behavior or attitude for hitting you? Do you sometimes think that you do nothing is ever good enough to please your partner? Has your partner ever stopped you from going or doing something that you wanted to do? Does your partner always claim to be right even when the opposite is obvious? Has your partner ever threatened suicide to keep you from leaving? Have you ever been coerced into having sex with your partner when you didn't want to? Has your partner ever threatened to kill you if you try to leave? So if your answers to these questions have overwhelmingly been yes, or even part of them have been yes, then it is likely that you are, in fact, in a domestic violence situation and you should be seeking help to get out of that situation, or at least to get help to make the situation less harmful. So I'm glad that we were able to enlighten you on the other side of domestic violence, which is violence against men. I hope some of these pieces of research and signs and warning signs of how to detect if you are in fact a victim of domestic violence have been helpful. And this concludes another episode of Muslims and Mental Health. Feel free to contact us with your comments, your feedback, your concerns at nafshealertherapy@gmail.com. That's NAFSHEALER therapy@gmail.com. And please check out our adjunctive website at nafshealertherapy.wordpress.com for links and valuable tips and articles and worksheets to help you with your mental health issues. Thank you.
Hi, welcome to Adelante. This is Adelante Recovery, and my name is Yvette Kuglin, and I'm part of the staff.
Adelante Recovery Center has helped people in dual diagnosis for 5 years. We accept most PPO insurances and provide luxury accommodations and 24-hour support. To speak with an admissions counselor, call 1-888-242-4450.
A lot of time we don't even know what's wrong with us, and sometimes we need to get away to figure that out. So if you want to go for a little retreat out in Corona Del Mar, which is a confidential location, we're here to help. So we're only a phone call away. Thank you.